All right, you ready? Three, two, one. What's up, my friends, and welcome back to another edition of the Run It Back podcast. Hello to you, and a happy 1 week closer to the regular season as we are now officially in spring training. Pitchers and catchers have reported, players have started to show up. We're starting to see some live BPs, some live batting practice, and it is starting to get to a point where baseball is within our grasp. It does start to feel tangible. It's very real. Hello to everybody. Tyler Zulli, Frank Klose here with you as well. And Frank, happy to be back with you again for another week of the Run It Back podcast. And I feel like for the first time, we have baseball within our midst.
I agree. I'm at the point now where I'm checking my Clearwater travel plans, and I'll be there 2 weeks from today. It can't come fast enough, Tyler. And just that warmth and that Florida, the smell of the Florida air, I think that's going to bring me right back to baseball.
There's something about being down in Clearwater. We went a couple of years ago, and I had never been before. I'd never done spring training. I went to one game, like an actual Threshers game when I was a kid, but I had never done spring training before. And it was such an optimistic feel. Obviously, you were in Florida, so it was much nicer than it was here in Pennsylvania. But it was just like this very laid back, low key. Everybody's excited. Baseball's on the horizon. If you obviously you've been and you're going again, but if you've never been, there is just such a feel of optimism, and I don't know if you get that in many other places. Like it feels like you get that, I don't know, at like Disney World. You know what I mean? That's kind of what this feels like.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, to me, everybody's escaping the cold from up north. Everybody's on vacation. Everybody's just taking life and slowed it way down. And to me, there's nothing like it. I went for the first time probably about 15 years ago, and I'm just absolutely hooked. And so I get there every single year. Only year I didn't go for spring training is the year my daughter was born, right as spring training began.
Sure.
But other than that, I went the month before anyway. But yeah, and I love going down in October and January. I just love the area, and again, that pace of life is just everybody's so happy. Everybody is optimistic for the baseball season. I think nothing beats it.
So we had a maybe less than optimistic week across Philadelphia and Philadelphia sports, but Phillies within the Phillies specifically. Nick Castellanos' departure, Bryce Harper and Dave Dombrowski's continued, I don't know, middle school drama spat that they have. And there was some good news. Zach Wheeler has been cleared to throw from upwards of 120 feet now, which means maybe he's closer to a return than we thought. We'll talk a little bit about that. But I think we start with the Nick Castellanos saga that is officially over in Philadelphia. So the Phillies release Nick Castellanos. The Padres sign him to the league minimum, so the Phillies will be paying about $19.2 million of Nick Castellanos' $20 million salary. The Padres will assume the other $780,000 or so. And if you ask the average fan, what was the Nick Castellanos experience like for you? I think you would get an incredibly wide-ranging variety of answers, from some clutch moments to some extremely head-scratching, disappointing moments to somewhere in between where you may find yourself in some semblance of reality. But before we dive into the numbers and the fallout of this, I want to ask you, Frank, what was kind of your lasting impression of the Nick Castellanos saga in Philadelphia?
Malcontent. I feel like he's the type of player that perhaps thinks more highly of himself than the numbers indicate, and as perhaps common sense indicates. And I think at the end of the day, it's marked by his ego. And from where I'm sitting and where I've sat throughout these 4 years out of the five that the deal could have been, it just seemed like it was just not a good match. From having too many DHs on the field to attitudes to believing he's better than he is, especially as his career went on. I just feel like he is somebody that just was not going to be happy no matter what, unless I don't know, unless they made him the centerpiece of the lineup and batted it clean up every time, and even the numbers didn't say that he should be. I just think it was. I don't want to say it was a bad idea to sign him. I think it helped the Phillies a lot. That was 22 when they went to the World Series. I think it had a lot to do with the fact that the Phillies were like, "Hey, we're not just gonna sit here. We need to win." So they signed both he and Kyle Schwarber, even though at the time it was like, okay, well, they signed two DHs. One of them has to play the field, and then they both ended up playing the field after
Mhm.
Harper's injury. So it could just kind of a mismatch from the start. But I give the Phillies credit for trying, but I just think overall it's just one big mismatch.
Well, I think the one thing that was intriguing at the time, and I actually was on the air at the Fanatic at the time, the moment that they signed Nick Castellanos, and I was very very excited about the deal because maybe I got fooled into thinking that Cincinnati Nick Castellanos was going to be the guy that you saw for 3 or 4 years, or hopefully 5 years, in a 5-year, $100 million deal. But even if it was a regression, because while Citizens Bank Park is a hitter friendly ballpark, Great American Ballpark might be the hitter-friendly ballpark, with the exception, of course, of Coors Field, and that has to do really more with atmosphere and altitude than it does with the actual ballpark. But when I looked at Nick Castellanos coming off that, was it 38 or 39 home run season, 120 RBI season with the Reds, and my thought was if he could be in the high 20s and then crack the 100 mark RBI, this is probably the perfect guy to hit within your top 4 or 5. You've added Schwarber, you've added Castellanos, you have Bryce Harper, you have Rhys Hoskins. You have a team that said, defense be darned, we're just going to mash. And that was their philosophy. And while it was potentially foolish in the sense that it wasn't foolproof, they had an identity that said, our defense may stink, especially on the days where Schwarber and Castellanos are both in the outfield at the same time. But we're going to out-hit you. We are going to out-slug you because we have Hoskins who could hit 30 home runs, Harper who could hit 30 home runs, Schwarber who could hit 40 home runs, Castellanos who could hit 30 home runs. And you supplement that with JT, who was still more of an offensive presence at the time than he is now. You supplement that with guys like Gene Segura, who just frustrate pitchers. You supplement that with the younger group, who at the time you had high aspirations for, Bohm, and you figure what Bryson Stott could be. And I think a lot of that at least had a direction. It didn't work in the sense that they didn't win a World Series, but it helped them get to a World Series. It helped them be a team that was consistently a postseason team. The problem that I have, I think, in looking back, in hindsight, of course, being 2020, was a failure to be willing to adjust. And I don't just mean with Nick Castellanos, I do mean with the Phillies specifically as well. But Nick Castellanos' adjustment and lack thereof, I think, was the kind of the death knell for his time here in Philadelphia as his numbers started to go in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I agree, and I liked him better in right field than left field. Oddly as that sounds, because usually usually you put the inferior defender in left field. But yeah, I agree. He did not really adjust. I mean, losing a little bit of that speed, even a little amount, you need to be ready to you got to be ready for the pitching that's out there. It's major league pitching, and they will adjust to you. So I feel like he just was too proud, I think, to adjust. I mean, that to me, I think the story of Nick Castellanos is the attitude because he was angry last year that he would hit seventh. He felt that was beneath him. He felt he was beneath being taken out for defensive purposes. Where, I that bothers me the most. I think because there's players on the fringes of the roster that's their time to play, and that's it. That's the only time they're going to play, right? So it bothered me that he wouldn't at least know himself enough to say, okay, let's rally around my teammate coming in to get the last few outs in the outfield. Again, being part of a team, you want that collaboration as well. And so I did not like his lack of willingness to, we say, make adjustments, but even the personnel adjustments, or adjusting to his career as his defense declined over time. So I feel like it's more than just adjusting to pitchers. It's just adjusting to the situation he's in. And in his head, he was very locked into who he thought he was, which was that Cincinnati Reds all-star from 2021, and there was no telling him otherwise.
I went back and I was trying to deep dive the numbers because I think initially everybody sits and says the first thing they point to is chase rate and its plate approach, right? And I think that there's 100% merit to that because the chase rates were poor throughout the majority of his time here. In fact, I was just kind of trying to pull some of these numbers real quick. He finished in his 4 years with the Phillies, he finished in the 3rd percentile, the 5th percentile, the 2nd percentile, and the 6th percentile. There you go. You see it there, the 3rd percentile last year. And the whip rates on top of it were not good either. Last year, 16th percentile, same thing in 2024, 5th percentile in 23, and then the 10th percentile in 2022. So the approach being see ball, hit ball, I'm going to get into in a minute why I don't have an issue with that if it comes with a strategy. But the problem that I see with all of those numbers and them heading in the wrong direction, Frank, is 2023, he had some sizably from 2023 to 2025, because 2022 was a bad year for him, especially coming off of the 2021 season he had that you mentioned with the Reds. But 2023 was an all-star, and he had it was really kind of propelled by the first half of the season. But barrel rates were in the upper echelon of the top 1/3 in baseball. Hard hit percentages, 63rd percentile. The problem is these numbers start to dip because you see in 2025, his bat speed was in the 23rd percentile. In 2023, he had a 72.4 average bat speed miles per hour. That dipped to 71.9 in 2024, which dipped to 70.5 in 2025. So we're talking about a guy who over a 3-year span lost almost 2 miles an hour on his average bat speed. When you are a guy who likes to be see ball, hit ball, and doesn't see a lot of pitches, again, something I will get into in just a minute, when you're that type of guy, if your bat speed slows down, the only thing that's going to happen is a natural regression towards more whiff and more weak contact. And you start to see the hard hit percentages go down, the barrel rates go down, the average goes down, but most importantly, the slugging comes down. And when you put all of those things together, I think there has to be an understanding of I'm not the player that I was in Cincinnati. Heck, I'm not even the player that I was 2 years ago. That's where the adjustments need to get made. And it felt like they never got made.
Yeah, he was again. I think he was just too proud to. I mean, Major League Baseball has some egos, and I think he had one of them. I just, when you look at the last few years, him butting heads with the manager and him butting heads with hitting coach Kevin Long, it's really probably a lot about this. What you see right here, Kevin Long probably trying to get him to make some adjustments. He didn't want to hear it, or he took everything personally as an insult. So I just tend to think the attitude prevented him from making these adjustments. Now, what I really want to know is, will he be humbled by this experience? It came out this week. The Phillies tried to trade him after the last 3 seasons. This year, maybe they got a little close to moving him to the Yankees, but in the end, weren't able to make a deal. The Yankees re-signed Paul Goldschmidt instead. They thought better of it in the end. But I think this is just the theme of this is, again, I mean, baseball is about adjustments, right? We hear it time and time again, and I don't think he really was open to doing so.
I will be intrigued, a little sidebar for a second. I will be intrigued to see how the Padres utilize him. Now, they said some outfield, some first base, some DH. Obviously, right field is cemented. Assuming health, Fernando Tatis is going to play almost every single day in right field. So that's kind of, that availability is limited. They also signed Miguel Andujar this offseason. They also have Gavin Sheets, who had kind of a little bit of a resurgence with the Padres after some struggles with the White Sox. I don't know where the playing time is going to come from. I do think he is probably going to be a 4th outfielder and a bench player for this Padres team. And when you bring up the humbling experience to it, I wonder how he and the team are going to balance this. I wonder how they're going to accept. He's a guy that's used to playing nearly every day. He played 147 games last year and was mad at his playing time. I would be curious to see how this goes if he plays 85 or 90 games this year.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a right-handed platoon to Gavin Sheets a lot of the time. I think that's what it's going to come down to. He has no clear position in the outfield, that's for sure. I mean, if you look at the Padres depth chart, they list him in right field, but of course Tatis is right above it. So
Right.
I mean, unless Tatis gets banged up or something and needs to take a couple games off, he's probably not playing the outfield. So you're looking at like sometimes first base, sometimes DH. Now, when it came to what he said while he was there getting introduced, he's like, "Oh yeah, whatever it takes for the team to win." Uh, if that's his attitude now, will it remain his attitude? I've got some questions about that, but I know the Padres, they had been on the market for somebody they could basically get as a waiver claim or a major league minimum type player. So they were not willing to do more for that last slot, that last right-handed bat, other than somebody just like him. So I mean, it sounds like Castellanos didn't have much of a market. I mean,
Yeah.
the Blue Jays, Toronto Blue Jays, they lost their right fielder Anthony Santander, who they had just signed to a big deal the year before. He's going to be out for a while, so rather than replace him in the outfield with Castellanos, they made other plans. Even Miami, everybody thought maybe Miami would be the spot, since he's from Miami. The Marlins just weren't interested in the end, even at the minimum. So he didn't really have a lot of suitors. So I really wonder whether he takes that to heart, and because he could still be effective. And if he, what was the old Socrates adage, know thyself and know thyself well, right? I mean,
Sure.
if he can embrace who he is and what he is now, then he can adjust. That's the big question for me heading out there.
Yeah, the Marlins thing was interesting because I was always under the impression, sure, I get he's from there. Sure, it's a young team who could probably use a veteran presence. But I do think the Marlins, who I expect to be improved this year, I'm not saying playoffs by any means, but I think that that's probably a 500 baseball team who you're going to go down to Miami and go, oh, it's Miami and there's nobody in the stands and it's playing the Marlins. And all of a sudden you look up and you lost 2 out of 3 on any particular series. I think they're going to be that like feisty, difficult out. You saw at the end of last year, they started to put things together a little bit. Really nice young core that they're starting to kind of piece together. I do still think obviously they're a few years away and some money spent away from being a postseason team. But I do think that Miami team, it was always interesting when people said, well, he's from there. And I'm like, well, it doesn't necessarily mean that the team wants him.
Yeah, that's fair to say. And I wonder what the Marlins are doing, because they didn't spend any money, as you said. But I feel like that's a team that's going to wait till after whatever happens with the CBA and then figure it out, I think.
So one more thing on this Castellanos thing. I want to ask you this because I know that this is a very divisive conversation. And I know people, when I say what I'm going to say, I think people are immediately going to get up in arms and say, well, you just complained about his chase rate. How do you feel about the see ball, hit ball approach to hitting and not seeing a lot of pitches per plate appearance? For him, for Alec Bohm does the same thing. Are you on the side of Bryson Stott where it's see a ton of pitches, but perhaps let that best pitch go by? Or are you more okay with the Castellanos Alec Bohm approach of see ball, hit ball?
I like the see ball, hit ball if it's Alec Bohm, because Alec Bohm makes a lot of contact, but you can't do it with someone with that bat speed of Castellanos. It just doesn't work. So someone like that, you need the veteran to wait for his pitch. I mean, I think in Castellanos' case, that's what he needs to do. With Bryson Stott, that's someone who can take 11 pitches, 11 pitches in one at bat, and it's actually those at bats have helped the Phillies out big time in some cases, right? Because he can get the pitcher out of there by running up the pitch count. But I think you need to be quick bat speed, high contact for that to work. So I'm cool with Alec Bohm doing it. But and again, batting 6th or 7th, as we said last year.
Sure.
But I just think Castellanos isn't a really good candidate for that at this point.
So the reason I ask and the reason I set it up that way is because I have less of a problem with the approach, assuming there's an approach. So the reason I ask is because last year, Nick Castellanos saw 3.67 pitches per plate appearance. That was the most per plate appearance that he had seen in the last 3 seasons. The last 3 years, he's ranked 117th, 125th, and 127th amongst qualified hitters. And of those 3 years, the amount of qualified hitters, 137, 131, 134. So he's towards the very back every single year in terms of pitches seen. But the reason that I prefaced it this way is because when you look at Nick Castellanos' first pitch numbers each of these seasons, last year 408 with a 1.13 OPS on the first pitch, 360 the year prior, 330 the year before, all with OPSs of at least 920 or greater. Now, this wasn't meant to be like a gotcha question or anything like that. I only prefaced it this way in the sense to say it works when you're getting the pitch in the zone. And
Yep.
when you're getting the pitch in the zone and driving the pitch in the zone, totally acceptable. And I feel 100% okay with it. The problem becomes last year, Nick Castellanos saw 674 sliders and sweepers. That's an insane number of breaking balls, more than fastballs seen. He saw 674 sliders and sweepers. His chase rate on those pitches, 44.1%. His out-of-zone contact number, 41.7%, which means that he is not putting 58% of those pitches that he chases in play. He hit just 211 off of sliders last year. I am totally cool with an approach that is ambush effective within yourself. It became very evident very quickly that if it was not a fastball in the zone, that effectiveness went way by the wayside almost immediately.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, especially when it really mattered. They look at the playoffs, just start Chavez up low and outside, and he's swinging at it. I mean, it's just it became very predictable. And if the rest of the league didn't do their homework during the regular season, I guess playoffs they sure did.
And I think when you look at those postseason numbers, he was good against the Mets in a small 4-game sample size, but 133 against the Dodgers. 042, just one hit and 24 at bats against the Arizona Diamondbacks. And the Diamondbacks were kind of they were the blueprint because the Phillies ambushed them in the first couple of games. I remember thinking after, I want to say it was after game 2, going to Arizona, being like, man, they might sweep this team. Like, this might be an absolute, like, this is a mismatch of talent. And Arizona adjusted. Merrill Kelly, Brandon Pfaadt, all their bullpen guys adjusted and basically said, we're just not going to throw you strikes anymore.
Yeah, that was the story of that season. This is exactly what they exposed. I mean, that's why, to me, they needed that number 4 hitter behind Harper and Schwarber, however they wanted to set them up. I mean, that's the thing that they still haven't settled, and Castellanos clearly was not it. So I think that's why they moved on from him, because at least with Garcia, you have a shot of him maybe, again,
Sure.
It's only maybe, claiming that spot.
Yeah, I think you're looking at maybe versus almost assuredly not. And that's really all we can kind of hang our hat on is a wait-and-see approach into that right field position.
Yeah, and it'll have to play itself out. I mean, because quite honestly, there was not a lot of other options out there from the right side. I mean, right now there's a dearth of right-handed bats in Major League Baseball. Kind of take for granted you can get one, but most of the talented hitters right now are lefties.
Which is a weird, it almost feels like a weird change, even from, 15 years ago or so. Because when you think about the true power hitters of the game for a very long time, I think about Pujols, right-handed, A-Rod, right-handed. Now, Manny Ramirez, right-handed. Like, there are a lot of righties. Now, there were obviously plenty of good power-hitting lefties. Ryan Howard was one, a ton of really good left-handed power hitters. But it did feel like for a while there was a lot of probably a swing to right-handed power hitters. I think that's kind of swung the other way.
Yeah, it definitely has. And finding that perfect slot and then finding someone at a position that you have available is also the other challenge.
So let's move on from Nick Castellanos. We'll talk about the Bryce Harper saga now. As Harper and Dombrowski kind of been firing shots back and forth at each other all offseason. I'll be honest with you, Frank, when Dombrowski first made the comments, I was sitting probably about 5 or 6 rows back from Dombrowski. And when he made that comment, I turned and made a pretty distinct face at our buddy Jim Salisbury, who he kind of looked at me and I gave him this look of like, did he just say that? Did that just happen? And it was weird. And then I kind of processed it and I said, maybe this is a veteran GM, veteran president of baseball operations, who has the cachet to say this thing to a guy who knows that he can take it, right? Who knows that he could use it as internal fuel and internal motivation. And I kind of didn't think anything of it after that. And then Harper wore the not elite shirt. And then now he's talking about, man, it sure would be nice to have a four-hole hitter behind me. I can't wait to hit in front of Aaron Judge in the World Baseball Classic because that's a good hitter behind me. There's been a lot of pot shots back and forth. And it's become this almost like, middle school drama where it's taking shots at each other via interviews and social media. And I find the whole thing very weird from kind of the two leaders of your ball club.
Yeah, I agree, and I had to go back because things get taken out of context, of course. So this is the quote. Um, he's still a quality player. He's still an all-star caliber player. He didn't have an elite season like he had in the past. Is that a fair thing to say about Bryce Harper's 2025? That's my question. I mean, is 3.1 WAR elite?
No, I think it's a fair question to ask. I think it's a fair question for me to ask you, for you to ask me, for us to ask the president of baseball operations. I think this was a down year for Bryce Harper. And if you went to Bryce Harper and said, hey, how did you feel about 2025? He would be candid with you. He would tell you it wasn't a particularly strong season. He struggled in the beginning. The expectation was big bounce back in May and June. He kind of did that. Took a dip towards the middle portions of the summer. And as you said, like the OBP was, 360, down about 30 points from his career average. The slug was down about 40 points from his career average. The OPS down about 60 points from his career average. Now, that's not to say that an 844 OPS is bad. It was second on the team. But when you think about it from Bryce Harper's standpoint, sure, it's a down year for Bryce Harper. It was not an elite season. And I think he would be the first to tell you that. I do think it has become obvious that Harper did not appreciate it being said publicly. I think if Dombrowski brought him into his office and said, hey, dude, I need you to be better next year, Harper would have been like, yeah, you're right. But I do think that Harper did not appreciate it being public. Now, Harper's the only one that controls this. Harper has the ability to say, screw this. I'm going to use this as internal motivation and have myself a 905 OPS, have myself a 519 slug. I know that he's not going to have, Nationals MVP type of season. That was a career year. But I do think that there is, a pathway for him to be better than he was last year. And I do still think he can still be that player.
My question is, like you just said, if he had called him in and talked about it, well, what I want to know is, why wasn't this just worked out between them a long time ago? Like, Dombrowski did clarify later that he says, oh, no, I meant that as a compliment. I still consider him an elite player, or however he walked it back. He did walk it back a little bit. So, but why didn't they just work it out? The fact that the T-shirt happened made me think that Dombrowski didn't even give him a call and say, hey, let me clarify what I meant.
Yeah, Dombrowski had a weird end-of-year presser. It wasn't just with Bryce Harper. That's the big news, obviously. But it wasn't just with Harper. I mean, you could tell that Dombrowski was fed up with Matt Strahm in that presser as well. And when that happened, I'm not surprised. And we talked about it last week. I love Matt Strahm. I think Matt Strahm is an extremely effective left-handed reliever at the bullpen. And I think the Royals got better by adding Matt Strahm. But as soon as he made those comments about, well, we did PFP, he didn't do it. It's like, well, he's getting traded. The first offer that Dombrowski gets that he feels is fair. I don't think Matt Strahm's on this roster anymore. I think that Dombrowski has maybe almost has his back up against the wall a little bit, because I think that he realizes they have not been as successful as they would hope. Now, to say that is not to say they've not been a successful ball club. They've won 90-plus games each of the last 2 years. They've won the division. I expect them to be right around that 90-win mark once again. They are still a good baseball team with flaws, yes, but still a very good baseball team. And I think he realizes that the postseason shortcomings of the last 2 years, and really the fact that they're 2-10. No, sorry, 2-8 in their last 10 postseason games. They lose games 6 and 7 to the Arizona Diamondbacks. They're 1-3 against the Mets. They're 1-3 against the Dodgers. They're just 2-8 in their last 10 postseason games. And I think he realizes that. And I think that maybe he was trying to, I don't want to say like issue a challenge to his leader, but that's what it felt like initially. It has become something entirely greater. And this is not to defend Dave Dombrowski. I think he needs to kind of put the foot to the pedal a little bit, and kind of figure out how they're going to have some postseason success. But I do think that that's what it was initially. It's way more than that now.
Yeah, in fact, it's almost become a meme in itself. It's if it. I think at this point, if it becomes what motivates Bryce Harper to take the Phillies to the
Great.
next level, then what the heck, go for it. I like that he's embraced it with the T-shirt in a lot of ways. I like how he came to spring training with that little edge. So let's see what that translates to. So hey, whatever motivates him. I mean, we are in a what's this, year 7 of this is like the middle year of the
Yeah,
13 years.
year 7, year 8, something along those lines.
That's year 8. So we're up to year 8. We're on the back half finally of
Wow.
that 13-year deal. I say that happened fast, right?
Life comes at you fast, man.
So you know what? Being on the back end of that 8-year deal, maybe it's time to shake things up, right? We don't want any boredom or ennui, right? You need to make this a something fresh and new. So I'll take it.
I think this will be an intriguing year for Harper because if this is a motivational tool and he ends up hitting 30 home runs or close to it, I think we'll all look back at it and go, hey, it worked. Whatever Dombrowski weirdly was trying to do, it worked. But I also do think that there is a chance that it could be a divider within the clubhouse and I wonder if other players look at it and go, man, he just called out Bryce Harper. If he's calling Bryce Harper out, he'll do it to me.
And to that end, you mentioned Strom. I mean, Dombrowski subtracted Strom. So, maybe it is a signal in a couple ways that the Phillies just mean business this year.
All right, so we'll kind of monitor this Bryce Harper situation, see how it plays out. I do expect a bounce back year from Harper. I didn't ask you that. Are you expecting a better year from Harper in 2026?
I think so. I think he's got to be better, but I think that answer will be based upon who's behind him, as you said, right?
Fair.
That's the one spot. I mean, Bryce Harper is seeing nothing to hit, and in a way that's the general manager's fault or the president of baseball operations fault, whoever's making the decisions, right? So he's got to find a solution to who hits behind him. My opinion is that will happen at the trade deadline, and Harper will be excellent down the stretch, and that'll make a big difference.
The unfortunate part about that is you're probably right. I do think they will try, especially if it's not working early. I do think they will try to acquire, especially a right-handed bat if one becomes available. The problem becomes, are you having the conversation of money versus trading away prospect? Now, I am not a prospect guy. I for the last couple of years have said that they had 3 untradeable prospects. They decided that they were going to trade one of them last summer. I thought Taillon was one of 3 guys I would not trade, but they ended up getting Joan Duran in the deal. The other 2 were Andrew Painter and Aiden Miller. I would still, for the right price, still would move Aaron Escobar. I still would move Dante Nori. I still would move Griffin Burkholder. There's a lot of guys that I still would move if the right deal came about. The issue is it's cultivating young talent versus having to go acquire guys via the trade market because you did not cultivate that young talent and you're up against it in terms of spending money.
Yeah, I love the old Casey Stern adage, the longtime MLB broadcaster and radio host. Prospects are cool, parades are cooler. So I think we're at the point where he's got to bring this parade or else. Now, the last rebuild was pretty failed. The one under the Andy McPhail, Matt Klentak years. So, it took a long time for the Phillies to sort of get back on track, and they had to spend their way out of it. So, I mean, this is time to do something, and I think they can still spend their way out of it again if they have to.
Unrelated, but you bring up that 2010 run, which was just some of the worst baseball I've ever seen. I was talking about this the other day. I think everybody had one guy that they were like, that's the prospect I think is going to be legit. I've always said mine was Nick Williams. I just thought Nick Williams was going to be, I don't want to say a star, but I thought was going to be like an everyday, middle of the lineup type of guy. Do you have anybody on that team, those prospects that you really were like, this guy could be a cornerstone?
I like Darren Altair. I thought he is like the nice mix of defense and power, and it's just a shame it never worked out. I mean, he had a very nice 2019, I believe it was, and then he broke his wrist. That's next spring training, or maybe I have my years confused, 18 into 19. But once he broke his wrist, he was never the same again. It was a real shame because I watched him break his wrist that day in spring training game against the Braves.
Sure. All right, so one final thing to get to before we wrap up today's show. The other day I was writing an article, and I was talking about the Phillies re-signings and free agents. And for this offseason, I've been really, really excited about the addition of Brad Keller. I think that even if he doesn't necessarily have the 2.07 ERA that he had last year, I think that he adds stability to the back end of the bullpen. And even with the departure of Matt Strahm, there's like 5 guys in this bullpen that I wouldn't say inherently, because there's sometimes issues with Kerkering. Alvarado gets wacky sometimes with his command. But more times than not, I feel pretty good about this bullpen and how it's structured. And so you think about Joan Duran from the beginning is your everyday closer. And then you look at Alvarado from the left side, Keller from the right side. That's your 7th and 8th inning. And then you go Banks and Kerkering right or left and right again, and that's your middle of the bullpen. That's 5 guys that I feel at least pretty good about heading into 2026. And so I've always been a big believer in the most important out, especially in a big game or a high leverage game, is the next one. And that, in that regard, is if you don't have a bona fide closer and you go closer by committee, getting the next out or the next 3 outs has always been paramount to the Phillies' success. They've done it for years, really without having a true closer, with the exception of the half a year that Craig Kimbrell was good. But now you have a legitimate closer for a full season. And I think for the first time, Rob Thomson can head into a full 162-game season with a structured bullpen. And while I like the ability to say, hey, go get me 2 outs, we need these 2 outs right now in the 7th, I think this year the Phillies having structure in that bullpen is a really good thing.
Oh, I'm with you all the way. I mean, the fact that Keller is a righty, Strahm was a lefty. I mean, essentially they traded out Strahm for Keller. They say they kind of allocated the Strahm money to sign Keller. That gives you a lefty and a righty at two levels, as you said. Sure. And I really like that you don't have to be so reliant on Kerkering to be your second man behind Duran from the right side. I still think very highly of Kerkering. I think that, any mental miscue that might have happened at the end of the playoffs, I think he's got a lot of talent. The Phillies would not trade him this offseason. And after what happened at the end of the season, I think a lot of teams were like, hey, so you want to trade that Kerkering, because I think they were kind of hoping that the Phillies would give up on him after that. But no, I think very highly of him. And I think, once he learns a little bit more on the mental side of the game, that he doesn't panic in that situation, I think he's going to get that much better. And that experience last year could end up being a real boost for someone like Kerkering. And the fact that he now has Keller behind him as another layer, as you look towards the end of the bullpen, I think this is just fantastic. So, you're going to go through the season. Some guys are going to need days off and it won't be as clear. But once you get to the playoffs, man, imagine going Chris Sanchez, Luzardo, Wheeler, and then just handing the ball off to these 5 guys at the end of the game. Like that's elite.
And I think really, if you can get one of the other guys to cement themselves as the 6th guy, whether it be Bolin or McCambly or Backus or like Pop, I don't expect to make the team, but who knows, right? If you get one of these other guys to kind of step up to be the 6th guy, which is really not asking a ton. I mean, you're talking about, hey, can you go get me 3 outs in a 3-run game in the 6th? Right? Like keep it a 3-run game or make sure that they don't score because we're up by 3 type of thing. I think you're not really asking a lot. If you can get one of those other guys to be the 6th guy, the one thing I do believe is that you will not have to allocate a ton of resources to the bullpen this year like you've had to in years past, right? Now, it could be spending money. You could end up with a vet like it. I'm not saying David Robertson specifically, but a David Robertson situation last year where you could just allocate a prorated salary, but you don't have to go and get an elite level closer like Joan Duran or somebody who was a could be a closer like Carlos Estevez. You have the ability to kind of structure those trades and focus those trades elsewhere for, as you brought up, potentially a right-handed bat down the stretch.
Yeah, I agree. And McCambley was not on the Phillies depth chart because he's a Rule 5 pick and he's kind of on the bubble. But I think the nice thing is they have a few spots that they can play with there, right? When you have that 5 that you can really count on, then 6, 7, 8, some of these guys like McCambley, like a couple of the like their trade acquisitions, they added a righty and a lefty. I mean, if those three can be your let's see what they got kind of relievers. And then you can maybe you're developing something for the future at the same time. So I really, really like that. I agree with you. I don't think Pop is going to make the roster in the end, but the Bacchus, Bolin, they've got some potential, and I even like that. They brought back Trevino and Meza, to stash at AAA because someone's going to get hurt, and those are some guys with some major league experience that if they end up filling those middle innings because they need to fill a spot for a few weeks, like, you don't feel that bad about it. So.
Sure.
I think those were nice pickups, and I think it says a lot about the Phillies that those guys wanted to come back because they probably on a lesser team could have had an opportunity. So I really do like that those players are there, and then, they even have other options. I mean, Genesis Cabrera, the one who perhaps most famously broke Bryce Harper's face a few years ago. He's a high throwing arm down at AAA. Again, someone who might be able to step in. He's got some major league experience. So I really like the depth from the bullpen. I mean, I know the last few years I really felt good about their starting depth, but this bullpen depth is much, much, much better than they've had in many, many years. Best than I can remember in a while.
Yeah. Speaking of depth, really quickly before we get out of here, Walker Buehler, minor league deal with the Padres. We talked about him last week. I'm a little bit surprised the Phillies weren't interested on a minor league deal.
I think they were. From what I heard is that Buehler wanted more of a guarantee that he would start.
Gotcha.
Padres don't have the rotation they had last year. I think there's a clear path for him in San Diego to be a starter. In Philly, you're kind of still seeing Taijuan Walker around. You're seeing Andrew Painter kind of waiting in the wings / probably starting the season in the rotation, and then you have Zach Wheeler coming. I bet you Buehler was like, well, if I re-sign with Philly, there's no guarantee I would be in the rotation come May. So I think he went for from what I understand, he was looking for something more guaranteed.
That makes sense. I do still think they'll add starting pitching depth at some point. I don't know when that comes, but I do think that they will add some starting pitching depth at some point. But that's pretty much all I've got. Anything else that you wanna add before we get out of here for the week?
I just can't wait to get down to Florida.
Well,
hopefully 2 weeks from today we'll do a show from Phillies. I'll be in spring training. You're more than welcome to come if you'd like.
I'll just stow away.
Yeah, there you go. Put you in my luggage. I have a carry-on.
Exactly. But so anyway, thank you so much for hanging out with us once again. If you liked what you saw, remember to drop a comment, leave us a follow, a subscription, wherever you're watching this, or if you're watching it on or listening to it on our audio platforms. Drop a like and drop a follow and a rating as well. We would really, really appreciate a 5-star rating. Until next week, we'll be back with the Run It Back podcast. That's Frank Klose. I'm Tyler Zulli saying we are 1 week closer to the 2026 Major League Baseball season. Can't wait. We'll talk to you again next week here on the Run It Back podcast. See ya.